My plate is still in front of me. The only things left on it are a few skinny chicken bones. I stare at them. They're delicate and pale, a grayish pink. They have a vague shine. I wonder now, in the elastic minutes I spend studying these bones, who gets to decide what's beautiful? Before tonight, I probably would have said that chicken bones were grisly, unsightly things. I would have thrown them right in the garbage without a second thought. But why? What's ugly about these parts? This bird fed me. I should cherish its bones. I fed me. I should cherish myself. I don't know who told you that Halloween was over, but they're wrong. And I'm right, because I'm a cat. Hello friends, welcome to the Eerie Fairy Tales. My name is Letty, and today we're going to do my October wrap-up. Yes, getting caught up. Finally, I am so glad. Unfortunately, October wasn't the best reading month that I had. I definitely did not get to all the books that I wanted to. I have two things to blame for that. That would be one book in particular that took me 2 weeks to read instead of like 3 or 4 days. And the second one would be my last video that I posted. My September wrap-up decided to totally screw me over a couple times and I had to re-edit the entire thing. So I got it up a little bit late and I ended up not being able to read as much as I wanted to. But I did get 7 books read. I got 2 half read. And then I have a couple that I wasn't able to get to, but I'll still go over those just briefly because I was planning to read them and I was planning to read them for a readathon. And that readathon was the Nightmare Before Christmas readathon hosted by Michaela Reads and Maddie Moon's Library. I will link their channels below. So I read a total of 2,075 pages, averaging about 67 pages a day, nowhere near my 100-page a day goal. But I do have a couple really good books that I read this month and one 5-star all-time favorite. So all the books I read are basically horror. A couple of them would be considered cozy horror and one would be considered like a gothic horror. I read short stories, an illustrated novella, and novels. I listened to 2 audiobooks and then the rest were physically read. So I'm going to start out with the books that I didn't finish, and I'll cover a couple of the books that I didn't even get to and show you my bingo card for the readathon, and then we'll get into the books that I read. And I'll do like I usually do, we'll do my least favorite to most favorite. This is going to be a little different though because I'm going to start out with the ones that aren't really rated. Not going to rate them until I finish them. The first book that I did not finish is Autumncrow by Cameron Chaney. He does have a YouTube channel and an Instagram. I will link both of those below. And he goes under the name Library Macabre, which, by the way, macabre, one of my favorite words. And these are Halloween short stories, and I read 67 out of the 156 pages, so about halfway. And look just how cute that cover is. I want to live here. It's a place where Halloween is every day and every night. It sounds like a dream, right? But no, because I started reading it and it's more like a nightmare, which is a compliment. Now, these are really unique stories. I haven't read anything like this, and some of the things that happened were actually pretty sad. There's a lot of focus on loss and grief, which makes sense because it centers around Halloween. The veil is supposed to be lifted between the dead and the living, and where you honor and remember the dead. And since I haven't finished it yet, I don't want to give a rating, but I did have a couple quotes that I would like to share with you. We cross the threshold and enter Autumncrow's cool October night. We are moonlit travelers, navigating empty streets, waltzing through cornfields, and wandering the valley. All the while, the roaring of the vanishing beach grows louder and stronger. If the water had a voice, I believe it would sing my name, a lonely siren's call. And last one, I don't sleep at night. It is hard to do that in this town. There are too many strange noises, too many voices, and the shadows, they never stop moving. I hide in different places every night, but the things in the shadows always have a way of finding me. Nightfall is a time for running, crying, praying, wishing for a way out of this cursed place, for a way to undo what's already been done. The next book I did not get to finish is The Honeys by Ryan Sala, and super cute cover. Also, some of the letters are raised a little bit. This is really pretty. Don't let the cover deceive you though, this is horror. In this we follow Mars, which is short for Marshall, and Caroline. They are siblings, specifically twins. Caroline dies in a horrific way, and Mars is propelled then to learn more about her. They used to be inseparable, and then leading up to the time of her death, she had become more distant, and he wants to figure out why. This leads him to an Aspen summer camp where Caroline had been spending a lot of her time before her death, specifically with a group of girls called the Honeys. Now, Mars is gender fluid, so he's having trouble fitting in with the boys at the camp, but the girls were actually the ones to invite him, so he seems to be fitting in more with them. However, he's still a bit suspicious of them because he thinks they have to be involved in Caroline's death in some way. He just doesn't know how. So at the camp, the girls stay in this place called Cabin H. Behind it is an apiary where they take care of all the bees. Now, this book hooked me from the first chapter. So far, I am about halfway through, a little over halfway, and I have tabbed quite a bit already. The purple color is stuff I like, and yellow stuff is like things I have questions on. I did appreciate the main character's gender fluid perspective because that's not a life that I live. It was wonderfully descriptive about the nature and the bees and all of the setting. It just sounds so beautiful. I wanted to go there. Now, because I have not finished this yet, I'm not going to rate it, but I do have a couple quotes that I wanted to share with you for now. Death isn't the end of a life, but the division of it. When someone dies, their soul scatters into all the things they've ever given away. Love, bruises, gifts. You struggle to piece together what's left, even the things that hurt, just to feel haunted. And this last one specifically talks about the Honeys. They were called the Honeys, as in worker bees, as in working class. It was meant as an insult. Then those girls grew up, and they used their connections to one another to grow rich. Their children attended Aspen in their place. Then their children's children attended, coated in the golden glow of nostalgia, and no longer stinking of charity. Cabin H became a symbol of industriousness and rustic glamour. Each new generation of girls built on the elitism of the last, cultivating a coy power as thick and ample as the honey they were named for. And all the while, year after year, they took care of those bees, planting flowers they knew the bees favored and harvesting the sticky rewards. With power comes exclusion, rituals, initiations, and tests of loyalty, or so people said. It's all supposed to be a secret, but the sort of secret everyone's meant to whisper about. The girls, meanwhile, feign obliviousness, hiding in their outward prettiness. The pet names and the chained pinkies, it's an act, specifically the act of a predator, like a stinging insect cloaked in the satin bell of a flower. I have heard this book described as a mix between Bunny and The Last Time I Lied. So Bunny by Mona Awad and The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. I've only read The Last Time I Lied, and I haven't read Bunny yet, although I do have it, and I'm planning on reading it. Hopefully I can get to it this month in November. I definitely get the vibes from The Last Time I Lied, and once I read Bunny, I think I'll see more of the relation there. This one I read 194 out of the 340, so I should probably finish it this weekend. So I'll have my final review in my November wrap-up. So next up, I have a couple audiobooks that I listen to. However, I do have the physical copies of the books. I don't usually listen to audiobooks. I do have an audiobook playlist on my channel called the Bibliophile Files. I always have that linked in my description. I do like the option of an audiobook when I'm walking or cleaning or driving or doing something when I want to read, like I can't physically read at that time. However, I have a lot of trouble paying attention when I'm listening to audiobooks. I miss a lot. I don't remember as much of it. I can't tab or annotate in it. I can't think about things while I'm listening to it, because while I'm reading physically, I can read something and I can think, oh wow, yeah, that reminds me of this and this and this, and oh yeah. And either I think of something that relates to the real world, or I think about something that it relates to in the book, and we can't do that when I'm listening to it because it just keeps going and then I miss what they said, or it interrupts my thought process. So I really felt that with these two books. I was also multitasking, so that's a problem. So these two, although I read them, I don't think I can really rate them because I didn't absorb as much as I wanted to. And eventually I would like to physically read these. The first one is just a little short story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. This is about a headless horseman who was said to have been decapitated during the Revolutionary War, and so he stalks the cemetery every night in search of his head to put back on his body so he can rest in peace. I'm sure you're all familiar with the headless horseman who carries a jack-o'-lantern. So in this story, we follow Ichabod Crane, who is a schoolmaster in this small town, and he is a fan of witchcraft and the supernatural. He does a lot of reading about it and studying about it. However, he's also kind of a scaredy cat, and he doesn't like the dark, and he gets freaked out really easily. Well, anyway, one night he's coming home from this party, and he runs into the headless horseman. And then the next morning, he cannot be found, and he's never found again. The only thing they find is his hat and a smashed jack-o'-lantern. And of course, I forgot 42 pages. The next audiobook I listened to was Dracula by Bram Stoker, and this is horror, classic gothic horror, and this one was 281 pages. This is a little larger just because, oh, that is shiny. It has all of his other stories in it. I'm sure you're all familiar with the story, but just to briefly go over it. So in this we have Jonathan Harker, who is a young lawyer from England, and he is hired by Count Dracula to acquire some property for him. So he travels to Transylvania to meet the Count and take care of all of this business. Well, he ends up being trapped there, and then he eventually escapes because he finds out, or he realizes that he's a vampire. Once he escapes, gets back home, he gathers a small group of people to then go hunt and kill Dracula. And this is an epistolary novel. It's told through letters, diary entries, journal entries, and newspaper articles. And there is one quote I would like to share with you from Renfield, who is Dracula's servant. The guy who likes to eat bugs and things like that. And this is when they were going to put a straitjacket on him. Pray, do not put me in a strait waistcoat. I want to think, and I cannot think freely when my body is confined. I feel that. Now, I do love this story just because I've watched the movie so many times. That's probably the only reason I was really even able to listen to the audiobook, is because I was familiar with the story from the movie. Oh, I will go ahead and link also the audiobooks that I listened to for The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, because that was a really good audiobook, free here on YouTube. It has a full cast and sound effects. And then I'll link the playlist that I made for the Dracula audiobook. That is an excellent narration. The narrator did a phenomenal job of the accents, the cadence, the inflection, just everything. One of the best I've ever heard. Okay, so before we get into the books that I did finish and did rate, I'll just share a few of the books that I wanted to get to but couldn't. These were all going to fit into the bingo prompts for the readathon. I did have a digital version of this, so I may be able to pop that in, but I wanted to show you my physical one that I was working on. It was basically like that, and then I just cut out little post-it notes to cover it. In the middle, you have a free space, and that's if you watch The Nightmare Before Christmas. Now, I don't have that movie. I don't have a TV. I'm sure I could find it. Maybe I could rent it on Amazon or YouTube. I don't know, but that one keeps coming off. But I didn't get a chance to watch it, mostly again because of that one book that took forever to read and just pushed my schedule way out of whack. And then the editing on that last video. So I was going for a blackout, and I don't even think I got a bingo. So womp womp. The first book that I didn't get to was Cirque Berserk, and this is by Jessica Guest, and this is basically a slasher at a circus that takes place, I think, over the 80s and 90s. And each chapter the name of each chapter is the title of an 80s song. So I think that's fun. I love when they do stuff like that. So didn't get to this one, but hopefully soon. The other book I didn't get to is Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. This one I am going to be reading November, this month for sure. This was going to fulfill a couple prompts, I think. Cirque Berserk was going to fulfill the clown prompt. This was going to fulfill a couple prompts, so I didn't get those ones, sadly. This is a sci-fi horror, and this is described as being The Shining meets Titanic, but in space, so very excited for that. The third one that I did not get to yet is The Family Game by Catherine Steadman. This I'm hoping to read tomorrow, which is Sunday the 5th, because the live show for Kayla's book club is going to be tomorrow. So hopefully I can get it read in like a day, day and a half. I don't know. But I'll go ahead and link Kayla's channel below. So if you wanted to check out her book club, Literally Dead Book Club, and this was going to fulfill the thriller prompt. I've heard this described as being compared to the movie Ready or Not, which I have not seen, but I get the basic premise and it does sound like a fun one. So my bingo card did not get Dead Silence. I did read Starling House. We'll get to that. I didn't get to read the Poe poetry. Starling House. Oh, but I drank coffee while doing that. So, hold on. Gotta fix that right now. You can double up, triple up on prompt, so that's what I'm doing. And then Starling House, okay, the Honeys I didn't get to read all the way. Cirque Berserk I didn't get to read. The Honeys I didn't get to read. Didn't get to read the poetry. Didn't get to read Dead Silence. Didn't finish Autumncrow. Didn't do the number. Didn't read Family Game. Didn't roll the dice. Didn't read Cirque Berserk. Never finished The Honeys. That was an anticipated new release. Or a new, yeah, was that what it was? Oh, it was going to be a book that I thought was going to be my new favorite. And then, yeah, so, and I didn't get a free space, so I didn't even get a bingo. But that's fine, you know what, because I'm going to still keep playing it just on my own. Okay, now we are getting into my fully read rated books, of which there are 5. And I have a whole range. I have a 2.5 star, a 3 star, a 4 star, a 4.5 star, and a 5 star all-time favorite. First up, we have the 2.5 star Floating Staircase by Ronald Malfi. Now, you know when people say, you know, I didn't really like the book, but I'm not mad at it? Oh, I'm mad at it. We got beef, Mr. Malfi. We got beef. I wasted 2 weeks of my life reading this. Was it my fault? Yes. Yes, it's my fault. I take responsibility for making myself suffer through this. But he tricked me, okay? He tricked me with the first paragraph. A couple moves into an idyllic small town in this nice house with this beautiful lake that looks like a postcard. But soon after they move in, weird things start to happen. And along with those strange things is this weird staircase that seems to be coming out of the middle of the lake. And the more that they investigate to see what's going on, the weirder things become and the more secrets are uncovered. Now, like I said, this book had a great opening paragraph. It hooked me. I thought it was going to be a 5-star read. And I love a good haunted house story. However, this is not it. It was not creepy at all or spooky. It was actually quite boring. I had to force myself to read this. Like, I was never like, oh, I can't wait to read that. I should have just known. I should have just DNF'd it. Seriously, this book should have taken maybe 4 days because it's 492 pages. I've read books that long in like 3 or 4 days. So the fact that this took me 2 weeks, absolutely ridiculous. It dragged. Oh my God. It dragged. I took notes and I wrote specifically. I said, oh, page 320. Now I'm intrigued and want to know what's going on. I'm sorry, what? Page 320 out of 492? Why did I do that to myself? Now, I would say this is a very slow burn. Mystery, horror, whatever you want to call it. There is a lot of talk of loss and grief. That would be the main theme. And it does seem like maybe the author himself has maybe dealt with something pretty heavy. That's just the impression that I got. And there's just like a couple things that would bother me, that would like stand out to me and kind of snap me out of the story. This is so weird. I know this is just a me thing. I don't like when people kiss my forehead. It's like a weird sensation, and he does it a lot in the book to his wife, and he would mention it several times. And it's like each time he would mention it in the book, I would like feel it on my forehead and I'd get grossed out. And then also, dude, I don't need so many descriptions of your shriveling nuts, okay? I know it's cold in your house. It's cold in the water. I don't care. I don't need to know about your shriveling nuts. So yeah, overall, this was like maybe 250 or 300 pages too long. This easily could have been trimmed down to like a 200-page book and been a lot better. That is disappointing because I have been wanting to read from Ronald Malfi for a while, specifically Come With Me and Blackmouth. However, I saw this at Half Price Books recently and I was like, oh, I'd like to check him out. I read the first paragraph. I'm like, yeah, that sounds just like something I'd like, and unfortunately, no. Okay, shall we get into some better books now? Yes, we shall. Oh, and if you can't tell, I have one of my family members over there. My feline friend, Mr. Fritz Wiki. Oh, he just moved. Next book I read was Midnight Companions by Luke Flaherty and artist Nathaniel Hebert. This is an illustrated novella, and this is 115 pages. And if you saw my September wrap-up, I read issue number 1, and I'll go ahead and link that video below if you missed it. Another really cool illustrated novella, high quality, has a bit of a different theme. The beginning, it follows a couple brothers. It involves a phone call from beyond, and some weird kind of ritual type things are happening. That's the first little story. And then it goes into like the main story. Follow this guy who gets his girlfriend pregnant, and then it follows the story from there. There's a lot that goes on. It's pretty intense. I actually had a hard time reading it myself. There were a couple times where I almost stopped reading it because it was just putting me like in a dark place. And although I do really enjoy horror and I like exploring different deep dark topics, there's certain things I just can't really handle. And that's just me. It was still objectively a good book, really good writing, descriptive, just phenomenal, excellent, really high quality. And this is an indie author as well, so I always love to support them when they do really good work. I'm not just going to be like, oh, it's an indie author, so I'm going to support them, you know, like this is definitely worth the support is what I'm saying. So if you can handle the content, then I still recommend this. Content warning I will give is bullying, self-harm, self-deletion, and termination of pregnancy. So those things aren't just like off-page lightly mentioned, it's the story. So that's probably why I had a hard time reading it, because it wasn't just here or there or part of the background, it was like the whole story. And there was certain parts of it that were pretty descriptive in a way, not like literally, it was more like a metaphor for things that were happening. You can handle the content warnings, I still recommend it. I gave it a 3-star, although objectively I would say it's 5-star with the writing and the art and the story originality and all of that. But just for me, based on my enjoyment, I would give it 3 stars. And that's why I think maybe some people don't do the ratings, because it is just subjective, but it's just a fun way to keep track of how much I enjoyed the book. And then also I think it helps when you are also interested in what other people read, how they like the book, and if you have similar taste, then that can help gauge whether you would be more interested in the book or not. You know, if that makes sense. And what's interesting too is I think that that's also a good way to gauge how your feelings have changed about that book over time, because there are some books that I've read a year or two ago that now, if I were to rate it, they would probably get bumped down a little bit. But anyway, back to my 4-star book. That is Starling House by Alix E. Harrow. This is a gothic horror, 304 pages. I did tab a little bit. I used the purple and green to match the front there. These beautiful birds, these are starlings. That's an actual bird. And as I mentioned in my last video, my September wrap-up, on the cover of The Stranger Upstairs, the house on the outside did not match the description of the house on the inside. This matches, and it's something a bit subtle. I don't know if anybody else noticed this, if you've read it, but in the book they talk about how, this isn't a spoiler, this is just like general information, but they have a key ring that has 4 keys on it. However, when he goes to give the housekeeper a copy of his key to be let in, he only has 3 on it, so he's missing one. And then on the front here, you have a bird that has 3 of the keys, and then you have another bird over here that has 1. So I won't say what that's in reference to specifically. I just thought that was a cool little detail. So in this book, we follow a couple characters, mainly Opal, who has a checkered past, doesn't really have parents in her life for different reasons, and she's also taking care of her younger brother. And then we have Arthur, who is the current owner / resident of Starling House. Starling House is actually a mansion. Now, Starling is the last name of the family, but like I said, it's also a bird. And I was curious about that. I was wondering if there was a deeper meaning to why the author chose specifically Starling. And a few of the things I found out about starlings is that they are emblematic of unity, and they represent strength in numbers, and that the idea of cooperation is integral to success. They are also symbolic of intuition and change. And they are impressive mimics. They can even mimic mechanical sounds. And brief interlude here to a totally different book. I just happen to love birds, and I have the North American Encyclopedia of Birds, or the Encyclopedia of North American Birds, whatever, you know, birds in North America. I've drawn quite a few birds out of this book, but I decided to look it up. The few things that I mentioned before, I found that online, but then when I got home, I was like, oh yeah, I have this bird book. So that is a photo of an actual starling. He said it's perhaps the most abundant bird in North America. They nest in holes in trees or buildings, often displaying other birds. Wow, so they kick out other birds and take their place. They compete with native birds and steal grain and fruit, but they do eat a lot of the insects. So, they sound kind of like little jerks, but they take care of the pests, so that's cool. So anyway, back to our characters. We have Opal, who ends up getting a job as a housekeeper, house cleaner at the Starling House. She needs this money to help with her younger brother. And although there's a lot of dark rumors surrounding this house, she just really needs the money, so she's just gonna go there, do it, get it over with. And when she's there, there's really weird things that start going on with the house. And this is actually a spooky book. Now, The Stranger Upstairs, not spooky. This was a spooky book. And, oh, what helped with that is there are illustrations throughout this book. Just like a handful throughout the book. I'll just show you the first one to give you an idea. So that's the first illustration that is shown. It looks just like a drawing, like a graphite drawing. Pencil drawing. So like I said, weird things are starting in the house. It's almost like the house is reacting specifically to Opal, and it's like the house is its own character. It's even described in the book as breathing and moving, like it literally will change. We have these weird things going on with the house. Meanwhile, we have some other shady characters that are blackmailing her for some information about the house. It puts her in a precarious situation. Now, I did like this story overall. However, there were just like a few things that I didn't really care for. First thing is, for some reason, it took me a long time to read this. Just like I would reread things. When I first started reading it, I thought, oh, I just have to get used to the writing, maybe that's what it is. But for some reason, I did that throughout the book, where I would have to like think really about it's so hard to explain, but it was like, it didn't just come easily to me. It's a gothic horror, but it's a modern gothic. It's not even the kind of writing that I think I would get tripped up on. For some reason, it just wasn't like smooth reading. And then once again, just like in Meg, the constant repetition. So in this one, we didn't have her almond eyes being consistently, continuously mentioned. No, it was her crooked teeth. I don't know how many times her crooked teeth or crooked smile was mentioned, but it was a lot. Way more than how they mentioned she has red hair, and they only mentioned that a few times. Wouldn't you describe somebody by their hair color more often than the fact that they had crooked teeth? Well, I think I know why the author did it. It was to show that she grew up kind of poor, and like she doesn't really fit into the rest of the upper class there. But it was just so much. It was like every other time they mentioned her, they had to bring that up. It's like, okay, we get it. I hate when they deduce characters down to like one or two traits. Just a personal pet peeve, really annoying. And while I did like the spookiness of it, for some reason there were parts of it that seemed redundant to me. Like I noticed I would start like kind of skimming over things, just like reading through it really fast. And I don't even think I ended up reading the epilogue, which is weird. I usually read everything. So I think that just shows that it could have been trimmed down, probably like I would say like 50 or 60 pages or so. So yeah, if this were like 250 or 260 instead of 304, I think that would have been a lot better. What was that? Black Cat? No. Black Sheep by Rachel Harrison. And this is Cozy Horror, and I give this a 4.5 star. In this we have Vesper, who is called back to a family gathering after she had escaped their cult. Now, you're not told what kind of cult it is in the beginning. You find that as you go along in the book. So she goes back because her old friend is getting married. So she goes back to this toxic environment where she meets up with her mother again, who was a former horror film star, but her dad is nowhere to be found. And it's revealed to you the kind of cult, where her dad is, what Vesper's doing about it. And this is about her balancing her own beliefs with her family's beliefs. I would categorize this as cozy horror. While there are horror elements, it's still like a feel-good horror story, if you could call it that. It's like a comforting read. There was a lot of sarcasm and humor throughout the book, and commentary on how fanatical and judgmental and manipulative some people can be, especially if they're related by blood. So it does also kind of touch on the nature versus nurture argument. But you know what? Just because a bunch of other people whom you may or may not be related to call you a black sheep, that doesn't mean that you're a bad person or that you are wrong. I forgot to mention this is 289 pages. I tabbed quite a bit. I used pink to match. And I won't share all of those with you, but I do have a few. I laughed again, but underneath this laughter was a staggering rage. It wasn't fresh. It was there always. A seething I kept stashed away, like a baseball bat behind the headboard. I experienced it in the usual way, a brief flare of blinding, white-hot anguish, followed by a mild chill of despondence, and finally a return to indifference. I opened my mouth to apologize, an automatic response, and was overcome with a bone-deep uneasiness, horror at a cellular level, as I realized it didn't matter that I'd left, or how long I'd been gone. The habits weren't broken. The dynamic hadn't changed. My absence made no difference. We were going to pick up right where we left off. Her being cruel and unloving, and me apologizing for everything. With all the scar tissue I'd built up, I forgot how easily I could be split open. All the shrapnel of her casual cruelty embedded in me, and now I had more damage to add to the collection. It occurred to me then that our past is not the truth. It's warped by time and emotion, inevitably muddied by love and resentment, joy and shame, hope and regret. I couldn't trust my own memories, good or bad. I was too afraid to look at my own face, afraid that my self-image had been further tainted by the time with my family, afraid that seeing them again had forever altered how I saw myself. What else could I do to get away from them? What more to separate who I was from who they were? I found it interesting that those who believed themselves righteous only ever cared about those who agreed with them, and were keen to let those who didn't suffer whatever brutal fate. There seemed to me an inherent hypocrisy in faith itself. And last one. What I do know, what I've learned the hard way, is that we don't get to choose our parents or the circumstances we're born into. We can't change our blood, but it shouldn't determine our fate. It doesn't. We still get to choose who we are, who we want to be. This book I wanted to read anyway, but I also read it because Jan Agaton read it for her Full Moon Book Club. I'll link her channel below in the live discussion that we had about this book. It was a really good one. This is a really good book to have for a book club. I could definitely relate to the main character as being the black sheep in my own family. This one has maybe what I would call like a couple small twists. I did see where it was going in a certain aspect, and I would say the only thing is that like the horror or like the gore parts were pretty minimal. So I think those could have been like expanded upon and maybe the ending not wrapped up so quickly. But overall, this was a really fun read. I read it really fast. This was a book that I was really looking forward to reading, and a book that I could see myself rereading. Okay, and the last book that I have to share with you is my 5-star all-time favorite, Cackle by Rachel Harrison. Another cozy horror book. And this one is 291 pages. And I tabbed a lot. Oh, can you see that? I used this really pretty lime green to match the cover. In this, we follow Annie, who just went through a breakup of her longtime boyfriend. She ends up going from the city to a small town and basically starting over. She ends up meeting this mysterious but really friendly lady named Sophie, who the town seems to treat a little differently, and she's not quite sure why. And so they start hanging out. Annie goes to Sophie's house, which is actually this like mansion out in the woods, and she starts noticing little things here or there and starts to suspect if she could be a witch. This reminds me of like a witchy Legends and Lattes, because you have the lady main character who moves to a small town to basically start over and do something different. She meets new friends. There's a lot of talk of food and drink in this book as well. And there's this really cute animal companion. In this book, we have this super cute spider named Ralph. I mean, so adorable. I never thought that I would think of a spider as cute, but this spider is so cute. They even dress him up in little different outfits, and like the first one they put him in is a top hat and a bow tie. Oh my god, that's such a cute like picture in my head. This cute little fuzzy spider wearing a top hat and a bow tie. That actually gave me an art idea. I want to draw that. So I'll share that with you all when I end up doing it. Now this book made me giggle a lot. I related a lot also to Annie, the main character. Rachel is really good at putting into words feelings and what you go through when you experience a really deep loss or a breakup, anything like that, or a huge change in your life. There would be times that I was reading this and I would get like that feeling in the pit of my stomach, you know, like when something really bad happens or you just lose something and it's just devastating, and you're inside her mind while she's navigating this new life, going through all these ups and downs, and she experiences a little bit of happiness, maybe hesitant happiness, and then also doubt. This I would consider like a feel-good horror story, if there is such a thing. Like, this is literally cozy horror, because it's like, I describe this as being like a warm, quiet hug when you're just feeling down. It's like she knows exactly how it feels and what you need to feel better. In this book, I have a few notes here in the front. I did a little picture of Ralph. That's just a little quick, like 2-second doodle. Okay, so I have a few quotes to share with you from this. Maybe I'm letting my cynicism deprive me of a positive experience. Even if this is nonsense, won't it be a comfort to hear about a future, any future that could possibly be mine? To temporarily escape the pain of the present and be reminded that one day this will be behind me? That I won't wake up every day feeling like my chest is full of stones? That I won't be constantly thinking about Sam or about everything I might have done to prevent myself from ending up where I am now? It's so easy to adjust when you're newly in love, when you're all gooey, soft, and malleable as an infant's skull. You make so much space in your life and in your heart, and when the person you love leaves, you're all stretched out. There's so much room inside me that I don't know what to do with, space I don't know how to fill. I've been waiting for it to shrivel up, for me to take my former shape, to be how I was before I met him. But it's not happening. It's been so long, I don't even remember who I was before him. You'll discover for yourself soon enough the things that devastate us most in the moment are always the things that we look back on with such gratitude. I wish I could believe her. I want to, but I can't let go of my cynicism. I have to keep it close, tucked under my seat like an inflatable life vest. I'm too afraid of what will happen if I allow myself to become hopeful. What terrible disappointments will attack while I'm stupid, happy, and unprepared? There's only so much I can tell you, only so much I can teach you. I can show you things about the world, about yourself, beautiful, wonderful things, but I can't make you believe them. There are some things you need to discover on your own, and this is Sophie. I don't smile when I don't feel like smiling. I don't pretend. I'm entirely honest about who I am. Is that my great offense? Or maybe it's that I live alone in the woods. And what's more damning, that I live in the seclusion of the trees, or that I live alone, or that I'm happy about it all, that I've made these choices, that I have these gifts, and I embrace them? I'm not ashamed of who I am, of what I am. What is it about a woman in full control of herself that is so utterly frightening? So yeah, that was just a few of my favorite quotes. I highly recommend this if you like the idea of cozy horror. Definitely a favorite of mine, and I'll probably be rereading this one as well. This was the perfect book to read in October. Thank you for joining me, the kitty cat Letty, for my October wrap-up. And if you made it till the end, go ahead and leave me a teacup or spider emoji, either one or both if you want, to represent my favorite book of the month, Cackle. Thank you all again for watching and spending a little time with me, and thank you for all the likes and comments. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one.